A few years ago, I worked overnight security at a storage facility on the edge of town. The place was massive, rows and rows of metal storage units separated by narrow drive lanes. During the day, there were always people coming and going, but after about 10 p.m., the gate locked automatically, and no customers were supposed to enter until morning. My job was simple: sit in the small security office near the front gate and monitor the camera feeds. Every couple hours, I'd also drive a slow patrol through the property just to make sure nothing looked out of place. Most nights were completely quiet. Around 2 a.m. one night, I was watching the monitors when one of the cameras caught my attention. It was showing movement near the far end of the property. At first, I assumed it was an animal. Sometimes raccoons or stray cats would wander between the units. But when I zoomed the camera in, I realized it wasn't an animal. It was a person. Someone was standing near one of the storage unit doors. The strange part was that they weren't trying to break into anything. They were just standing there, facing the camera. I grabbed the radio and called my supervisor to ask if anyone was scheduled to be there overnight. He said no employees, no customers. So I grabbed a flashlight and got into the security vehicle to check it out. The drive across the property took about a minute. When I reached the row of units where the camera showed the person standing, the lane was empty, completely empty. No cars, no people. I got out and walked slowly down the row, shining my flashlight along the unit doors. Nothing looked disturbed. I checked the ground too. No tools, no signs of forced entry, nothing. Eventually, I figured whoever it was must have jumped the fence and run off when they saw the patrol vehicle, so I went back to the office. But when I sat down and looked at the camera feeds again, I immediately noticed something strange. The same camera was now pointed at the ground, just asphalt. I frowned and pulled up the recording from earlier. On the playback, I saw myself driving the patrol vehicle down the lane, but about 30 seconds before I arrived, the person stepped up to the camera pole, reached up, and physically turned the camera downward. That's why I didn't see them anymore. But that wasn't the strangest part, because the camera wasn't that low. It was mounted almost 12 feet off the ground, meaning whoever turned it had to climb the pole to reach it. Security checked the property again the next morning. The fence wasn't damaged, the gate log showed no one entering overnight, and none of the other cameras ever showed anyone leaving the facility. But the camera in that lane stayed turned toward the ground, like someone had made sure it couldn't see them anymore. The thing that bothered me the most happened a week later. I was reviewing footage from another night shift when I noticed something. On one of the cameras near the front gate, a man was standing outside the fence, looking directly toward the security office, just watching, and when I zoomed in on the footage, I realized something. He was wearing the exact same clothes as the person from the storage unit camera, which meant whoever had been inside the property that night had been watching the security office the entire time, too. A few years ago, I worked the overnight shift at a shipping warehouse just outside the city. The place was huge. Rows of tall metal shelves filled with boxes, forklifts parked along the walls, and long concrete aisles that seemed to go on forever. During the day, the building was packed with workers and trucks coming in and out, but at night it was almost completely empty. Most overnight shifts only had 2 or 3 people working. My job was simple. I was responsible for scanning outgoing packages and stacking them near the loading dock so they would be ready for the trucks arriving in the morning. Around 1 a.m., the other 2 workers usually finished their tasks and moved to the opposite side of the building. That meant I was often alone near the loading dock area. One night I was working like usual when I heard something behind me. Footsteps. At first I didn't think much of it. People walked around the warehouse all the time. But when I turned around, the aisle behind me was empty. I figured one of the other guys had passed through, and I just didn't notice, so I went back to stacking boxes. A few minutes later, I heard the footsteps again. This time they sounded closer, slow steps on the concrete floor. I turned around quickly, expecting to see one of my co-workers. But again, the aisle was empty. Now I was confused. The warehouse had security cameras everywhere, so I assumed maybe someone from another department had come through. Still, the building felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. About 10 minutes later, I heard the sound again. Footsteps. This time they were coming from the next aisle over. I walked to the end of my aisle and looked around the corner. Nothing. Just rows of shelves and stacked boxes. That's when something else caught my attention. A forklift at the end of the aisle was slowly moving. Not driving, just rolling slightly forward, like someone had pushed it. I walked over to it and grabbed the handle to stop it. The key was still in the ignition, but the engine wasn't running, and none of the forklifts were supposed to have keys left in them overnight. At that point, I decided to check with the other workers. I walked across the warehouse toward the opposite side of the building. When I found them, they both looked confused when I asked if either of them had been near the loading dock. They said they had been working in the same aisle for the last half hour. Now I was starting to feel uneasy, because if neither of them had been there, then someone else had been walking around the warehouse. We decided to check the loading dock area together. When we got there, everything looked normal. Boxes stacked, dock doors closed, no one in sight. But then one of my coworkers pointed toward the far end of the dock. There was a door there that led outside. It was slightly open. That door was supposed to stay locked at night. When we walked over and looked outside, we didn't see anyone, just the dark parking lot behind the building. But on the concrete floor near the door, we saw something. Fresh, muddy footprints. They led into the warehouse, but there were no footprints leading back out. We reported it to the supervisor the next morning. Later that day, security checked the cameras. Apparently around midnight, someone had walked through the open dock door. They moved through several aisles of the warehouse before disappearing behind a stack of pallets near the loading dock. The strange part was that the cameras never showed the person leaving, which means whoever that was had been somewhere inside the warehouse the entire time we were working, and we had no idea where they went. This happened when I was working the night shift at a small gas station during my second year of college. The station sat just off a highway exit on the edge of town. During the day, it was busy with commuters and truck drivers, but after midnight, the place was almost completely dead. Sometimes 20 or 30 minutes would pass without a single car pulling in. Most nights I worked alone from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. My routine was simple: clean the counters, restock the coolers, and keep an eye on the security cameras. One night in late November, it had been raining for hours. The parking lot was empty except for the reflection of the streetlights on the wet pavement. Around 12:40 a.m., a car pulled into the lot. It was an older sedan, maybe early 2000s, and instead of pulling up to a gas pump, the driver parked near the far end of the lot by the air pump. The engine shut off, but the driver stayed inside. At first, I didn't think much of it. People stopped there all the time to check directions or make phone calls. But after 5 minutes, the car still hadn't moved. I looked up at the security monitor behind the counter and watched the car through the camera feed. Because of the rain and the lights reflecting on the windshield, I couldn't see the driver clearly. Eventually, the driver door opened. A man stepped out and walked slowly across the parking lot toward the store. When he came inside, something about him immediately made me uneasy. He didn't look drunk or angry, just strange. He walked up to the counter and stood there for a moment without saying anything, looking around the store. After a few seconds, I asked if he needed help finding something. He asked if we sold phone chargers. I pointed toward the electronics rack near the back wall. He walked over, grabbed one, and brought it to the counter. I rang it up and told him the price. He paid in cash, but after I handed him the receipt, he didn't leave right away. He stayed standing there. Then he asked a question that immediately made me uncomfortable. He asked if I was working alone that night. Anyone who works overnight knows that question is a red flag. So I lied. I told him my coworker was in the back stocking shelves. The man looked toward the back hallway for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. He grabbed the charger and walked outside. I watched him through the front window as he crossed the parking lot. Instead of driving away, he got back in the car and just sat there again. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The car never moved. At that point, I locked the front door. Store policy allowed us to lock it late at night if we felt unsafe. I kept watching the parking lot through the security cameras. After about 40 minutes, the driver door opened again. The man stepped out, but instead of walking toward the store, he walked around the side of the building, out of view of the cameras. My stomach dropped. The side of the building leads to the back alley where the dumpsters are, and there are no cameras back there. About 30 seconds later, I heard a faint rattling sound. The back door handle. Someone was pulling on it. I froze behind the counter. The rattling happened again. Then it stopped. A minute later, the man walked back across the parking lot, got into his car, and drove away. I called the police after that. When an officer arrived and I told him what happened, he asked me one question. He asked if the man had asked whether I was working alone. When I said yes, the officer looked concerned. Apparently, a gas station down the highway had been robbed earlier that week. The suspect had asked the clerk the exact same question before leaving. Then he came back later that night. That's when the robbery happened. The officer told me something that still sticks with me. He said if I hadn't locked that door, there's a good chance the man would have tried coming back inside.